Welcome to another interview episode of After the Abuse. Today we'll be talking with Michael Broussard. Let's get right into that. Michael is joining us from Pennsylvania via FaceTime. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Please tell us a little about your life now.
My life now is mostly ranged around telling my story publicly, which is something I've been doing since like 2014. I got to the point where I was healed enough that I could actually go out in public and share my story to help other survivors. And that has made a huge difference in my life. I do this show called Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor. And what it is it's me telling my story, but also interrupting at several points while telling my story to go to the audience, to get comments, questions from other survivors, from people who want to know more about what the survivor experience is. And that actually has helped my healing so much, making contact with so many survivors and having them share their stories with me. That's empowering for me. When they say that what I'm doing helps them, that makes me feel stronger, helps my healing immensely. And the fact that it's been well received by therapists and advocates and academics and all these different people. You know, as a survivor, I have a lot of anxiety and a lot of insecurity. And I don't feel like I can do anything, you know what I'm talking about. And so this, I've got psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers and people who work for the Children's Lines telling me, I love what you're doing, it's really important. That helps a lot. That takes me from feeling like nothing to feeling like, hey, I might actually be something. I might actually matter. So that's been so healing for me, so enormously healing for me.
Can you tell us a little about what you had to endure as a child?
Yeah, this always gets difficult for me, even though I tell it on stage. When I do that, it gets difficult for me on stage. I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to censor myself. I was going to tell my story, I was going to tell it. And if I cried or I had problems, I'd have those in front of people, which is a very hard thing to do, but it tells other survivors, here, look, we're all like this. And, I was raped by my stepfather from the age of 7 to the age of either 10 or 11. I'm not 100% sure when it began, because I can trace that to specific events. He raped me over and over and over again for a year, several times a week, because he had access to me. He was the janitor at St. John's Catholic School that I went to that school. He would go in on the weekends and he'd take me with him, to catch up on stuff or whatever. And he would use that opportunity, being alone with me in the school, to abuse me. And it was after a year of that I told my mother about it. They had a big yelling and screaming fight, and she kicked him out. It wasn't until I was partway into doing my show in 2014, I realized that it went on after he left after that year. And the reason is, I had done this show, I was talking to my older sister on the phone, and she had also been abused. And she said, I guess you don't remember. I heard you saying that this ended after a year. You do remember that he was able to come back and take each one of us alone for child visits. So our mother let him do that. That was a moment when all of a sudden these nightmares that I thought I just made up in my head about later years being raped by him, all of a sudden they became memories, and the memories came with other memories, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, he raped me for like 2 or 3, maybe 4 more years. And it was because my mother knew what was going on, but she let him take me anyway. And that just was devastating to me. It was devastating. I didn't have a good relationship with my mom anyway. There was an extreme amount of abuse that went on between me and my mom. She was very violent. And I was trying to talk about what I was going through, and I was having a hard time, and her way of getting me to shut up was do things like sit on top of me and try to smother me and things like that. So, as an adult, I moved away from home as far as I could go. I didn't have any kind of relationship with her for a long, long time. It was actually in that conversation on the phone with my sister where I'd been away for a few years, and I said, you know what, Mom, at least she looked after us. When I told her what Harold was doing to me, she kicked him out. She never let him back again. And that's when Ruthie said, well, I guess you don't remember. After all this healing, I had another hard time with this new information, to the degree that, yes, those had been uncovered memories because of what she had said to me. They'd been triggered. But in my mind, I'd been saying in the show all along, I don't have any uncovered memories. I remember everything. And it was while I was telling the audience about this phone call that somebody during one of the feedback breaks said, isn't that an uncovered memory? And I'm like, oh my God, you're right, it is. I'm so sorry, you're so right. And this happens to me all the time in the show. I'll discover things because somebody will say something. And I'm like, oh my God, we just put those 3 things together, and I just realized that.
Abuse survivors often have a distorted view of self-worth. What do you do to remind yourself that you have worth?
Well, yeah, that does come up a lot, and it comes up constantly. There's a thing, it's sort of a sideways way to answer the question, but there's a book called A Soprano on Her Head. And I like telling people about this book because I think it's a great help to anybody who has anxiety or self-worth issues. And one of the things it talks about is the voices in your head that you think are your voice, that are telling you you're worthless, useless, dirty, wrong, bad, stupid, all that stuff. There's an exercise in the book where you close your eyes and you try real hard to picture who those voices belong to, who are abuser, your parent, your teacher, a bully. And once you realize that it's those people, you can look at them and say, you know what, that's not my voice. That little thing that's telling me I'm not worth anything is not me. It's you idiots, and why should I let you control my life? So that exercise for me, I mean, I do that over and over again, and it's fantastic because I not only get to look at them and find out who they are, the other part of the exercise is start to mess with them. Give them squeaky cartoon voices, make their heads so big they fall over, and before you know it, these people that are ruling your life are complete and total. They're weak, they're pointless, and they disappear. They don't disappear permanently. I have to do it again, but we all do it again. So that's one of the things that I do, and that I think that's helpful to anybody. My therapist was just like, "That's great. Keep doing that. That's great."
And how do you counter depression when things seem the most bleak?
After it occurred and into my early teen years, actually into my late teens, I had this feeling like I was at the bottom of a black pit. That's the image I had in my brain, and I could not see the top. That's how depressed I was, and I was always depressed, and I always felt like a failure, and I always felt like my life would never be any better. I did eventually find my way out of that kind of depression, so I never go back there again. But to some degree, having known that kind of depression, when I get really depressed now, and of course it does happen, I would say to myself, you know what? You're not at the bottom of that pit. You're not happy right now. You can't deal with people right now. You're so tired you can't get up right now. But I remember what my therapist said, which is, you know what? You're putting out a lot of energy with what you do and telling your story and all that. You need to give and just all of us, just healing is an enormous amount of energy that we put out, enormous amount of strength we use. I give myself space to say, listen, you know what? You can't necessarily get happy right away. You're not going to feel great today. Some of it's chemical. Some of it's emotional. Just listen to music. Just spoil yourself. Go watch those TV shows you wanted to see on Netflix that you weren't going to watch, and watch 6 of them today and just shut out the world, And that's a lot of it has to do with that. It has to do with like saying to myself, you know what? You're depressed. This will end. But you're only going to make yourself worse by beating up yourself about being depressed. One of the things that comes up a lot is, when the anxiety is bad or when the depression is bad, when you, for example, if you can't answer the phone or if you can't go to the door, you can't talk to people. And these things happen. And I used to go, oh my God, I thought I did all this work and I'm useless. I didn't get any better because I'm useless today. So I'm sliding all the way back. She said, last 2 therapists both said, you've got to give yourself space. You've been through immense trauma, stuff that would kill a lot of people. You need these spots. When you say, okay, today I can't answer the door, I can't answer the phone, I can't deal with stuff. Read a book, turn on the TV, listen to music. You're replenishing yourself. Because if you don't replenish yourself, you're never going to heal and you're never going to survive. So I mean, that kind of thing has just been such an enormous help to me, giving myself space to be human, also not looking at myself and saying, I'm not as far along as that person over there, I must be a failure. There was a period of time after all the pills and the addiction and all that, when I was clean, that I never left the house. I was agoraphobic. I basically never left my room. I stayed up there, listened to music, watched TV, listened to the radio, whatever. It was being a sci-fi geek back then that actually saved my life, because I joined like a sci-fi fan club through the mail, and I got myself some pen pals, like people that couldn't see me face to face. So that you're always afraid people, if you tell them the truth of what you went through, they're going to run away screaming. I have to worry about that because I could keep it at a distance. It was cool. And so I got these sort of paper relationships. I got a flyer in the mail for a Doctor Who convention, and it was Tom Baker. Now, if you know old Doctor Who, Tom Baker's like the guy. Tom Baker's like the most popular doctor of all time. Nothing in my life, including like having a functioning life or friends or anything like that, could get me out the door. But seeing Tom Baker got me out the door. I took the bus to Boston. I went to this convention. I stood there in line, looking at the floor, hoping nobody would talk to me. I basically got dragged into conversations by fans who, like me, couldn't shut up about things. And I got forced to having a conversation with people. And that was the beginning of my life opening up, because I realized that there were other weirdos who wanted to talk about the same weird things I wanted to talk about. And these conventions were like little bubble worlds. We could all be freaks and everything was cool, you know? I couldn't tell anybody about the abuse for many, many years, but I could talk to them about Larry Niven, and I could talk to them about Tom Baker, and I could talk to them about, you know, about whatever, you know, all this, you know, sci-fi movies and things like that.
It's common for abuse survivors to have to deal with substance abuse or addiction in one form or another. Is this something that you've had to deal with?
It's not still, but it's definitely something I dealt with. By the time I was 15 years old, I was pretty much a raving alcoholic. And I know what that was connected to. That was connected to trying to double down the memories and the flashbacks. Because if I was drunk, if I drank to the point of blackout, I didn't have dreams. And while I didn't have a clear idea that's what I was doing at the time, it's something what I realized I was doing several years later. I was definitely trying to black things out. Also dealt with a pill addiction, speed addiction. I had access to things because I had relatives who were using them. So I had access to things, you know. All of it was about dulling my brain down, because I had I have this brain that's like going all the time, you know. And so therefore it was like fertile territory for flashbacks and memories and triggers, and I could not sleep at night. I had been going out and getting really, really drunk. Alcohol was really easy to come by in my family circle, in my town, and everybody drank. So it didn't matter that I was 15 years old. I could still get booze. And I would go out at night, and people would buy me drinks, and I'd get drunker and drunker and drunker. And as long as I was paying for drinks, they'd be more than happy to see me black out, and they could take my money and run away. And then there was one night that I blacked out, and I woke up, and I was in the middle of the street, and it was dead of winter in Clinton, in Massachusetts. And so, I mean, it was like icy and horrible, and, you know, and freezing, and it was god awful. And I didn't know where I was. I couldn't remember where I'd been. I couldn't find the people I'd last been with. I was stumbling around. I got picked up by the cops. First time I ever was arrested for anything, and I don't think I was really arrested so much as they grabbed me for my own well-being. They brought me to the police station, and I looked at myself in the mirror when they told me to clean myself up, and I discovered that somebody had beaten the holy crap out of me. That I had bruises, that I had blood everywhere, that somebody had tried to pull an earring out of my ear, and you could see it torn. They brought me home, you know, in a blanket, and I laid down on the couch, and basically woke up the next day and said, I want to live, so I will never drink again. And so AA worked for a lot of people. I didn't use AA. I used, I don't want to die. And that made a huge difference for me. And after that, I did have problems with pills and some other things. But the problem with kicking these things, all of which I did before I was 20, is that now that I was clean, my life still sucked. You know, the same people were around me, the same trappings, the memories of everything going on, my horrible relationship with my mother, all the violence, all the fear, this town where I felt like I'd been marked by every bully in town. So, you know, if I go out of the house, I'm going to get the crap beaten out of me just as a matter of course. So I kicked all that stuff, and then I looked around like, what the hell do I do now? What the hell do I do now? Because I can see everything clearly, and I don't like what I see. And I don't understand how to get out of this, you know?
What would you say was the catalyst for you to start your healing journey?
The initial catalyst, when I first tried to, was that I had basically run miles away from where I lived in order to get away from everything. I grew up in Massachusetts. I had run down to Philadelphia. It was actually thanks to somebody I met at a convention who let me come down near here in this area and stay with her while I was sort of getting a job and getting on my feet. It was like how to run away from the horrible situation I was in. There was a little bit of the, getting involved in fandom, and it helped me to a degree. I still was kind of spinning my wheels and actually dealing with the abuse and the damage that it had done. And nightmares were still fresh. The flashbacks were still fresh. They were still constant. I did get into therapy for many years. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere, like I wasn't getting any better. Because in my mind, there was this idea that you were going to get better. One day you were going to be like, oh my God, I just discovered it. Now I'm better. This is fantastic. I never have to think about it again. This is awesome. And because that moment wasn't happening, I decided I was spinning my wheels and I left therapy. And the catalyst for me getting back into therapy was my wife. We got married and we moved out to the suburbs outside of Philly. And I was still going through a lot of hell. I was still in this place where if I made even the slightest error, if anything went wrong, if I screwed up in any way, I would beat myself senseless about it. I would tear myself down. I would treat myself like it was the lowest form of life. And she loves me. And she saw me doing this. And she tried to help. But she's like, I don't know how to help you. I don't know what to do. And she urged me. She's like, get back into therapy. She's like, because if we're going to have a happy life together, I need you to find a way to communicate about this. Because I have no way of communicating with you about this because there's this wall. And it was actually thanks to her that I got into therapy. And it was thanks to the therapist that I ended up with that I learned the most important thing of all, for me at least, which is it's not about being better one day and being enormously happy and like everything's great. It's about learning coping skills. So when these things happen, when the anxiety attacks happen, they will happen. When the depression happens, it will happen. You know, when you're having a panic attack, it will happen. You have coping skills. You have things, okay, I'm going to employ these. It's not second nature to employ them. It's not reflex to employ them. I have to think about employing them and employ them. But if I look at the way I dealt with my stress and my anxiety and my depression and my sense of, my sense of self-worth, which is incredibly low, if I look at the way I used to deal with it and the way I deal with it now, I have conversations with myself that go, this is just chemicals. This is just flashbacks. This is, wait a couple of days. That was the catalyst. That was the catalyst that really changed my life, was her saying, listen, I want to help you, but I don't know how to help you. And she and I now have the greatest conversations. We go out for walks. She wants to know. She wants to know how things work with somebody who's been traumatized, with somebody with PTSD. Dissociation is a big thing we talk about. It's this wonderful thing that keeps you alive when you're being abused, because you can go somewhere else in your head. I could go fly away to this, mysterious land I wasn't being raped at the time. And it's a survival mechanism. But I got to be an adult, and I found I wasn't in conversations with people and didn't even realize it. I wasn't present in my own life. I wasn't present in my relationship. We've gotten to the point where I can say to her, listen, I'm dissociating right now. And it's not because I don't enjoy this conversation. It's that it's this reflex, and this balloon goes away, and I have to grab it and drag it back down again. So I give her this image, and she gets it. She's like, okay, you're dissociating. We'll repeat what we just talked about, but we'll wait until you're there again. It's been that I can have this thing in my life. I can have this wonderful relationship with this woman after God knows how many horrible relationships I had. And I don't blame the people. I blame both of us, because I was equally a pain in the ass. You know what I'm saying? It's a hard thing for people to deal with, particularly when you don't even know how to deal with it, and you're a jerk because of it. So now I had this thing that was so important to me, which is us together. And that made me try. And that has made all the difference in my life and led me to being able to go out and tell my story, and led me to this place where now other survivors that I have a lot of, we all know a lot of survivors on the internet, all over the world. Survivors who want to tell their stories contact me, and they say, can I talk to you about it? Can I get some advice? And of course my first reaction is, well, I don't know anything, so what am I going to tell you? But they're like, no, you're doing it. So that in of itself makes me feel good about myself.
And what would you say to someone who's just starting on their healing journey?
That's a tough one. That's a hard one, because I remember when I was first starting to deal with it, and it was the last thing I wanted to do was deal with it. Well, something I said earlier I think is important for people to understand, and I hear this from many survivors in different stages of their healing as well, and that it's going to get worse before it gets better. But the fact that it gets worse is not a sign that you're not healing. The fact that it gets worse before it gets better is a sign that what you went through was absolutely traumatic and painful. And to process those memories, to find your strength in there, to stand up to that situation, and to claim your own 2 feet, your solid 2 feet on the ground, it's going to take a lot of work. And you can't go into it going, one day, like I said earlier, one day I'm going to be better. One day I'm going to be all better. At least not in my experience, and I can only speak for myself. It doesn't work that way. What you're going to do is, if you're smart, you're going to go into your therapy. I think therapy is an incredibly valuable tool. It's not for everybody, but I think it's an incredibly valuable tool. And my personal recommendation is therapy. Get somebody you can talk to who is not your wife, who is not your brother, who is not your mother. Because you need somebody you can talk to without censoring yourself, worrying what they're going to say to somebody else, or how they're going to react to you, or whether they're going to love you anymore, or whether they're going to respect you. Have somebody you can say anything to, and it doesn't matter. And that person's job is to support you. As far as therapy goes, do not settle when it comes to a therapist. Don't go, well, this is the way therapists are. Because you deserve the right therapist for you. The one that makes you feel comfortable. The one that makes you feel like you want to talk. The one that makes you feel like you're being heard. And everybody needs something different. Some people need to be knocked into shape. They like that. Some people need gentleness. I need gentleness. But I also need a therapist who won't let me get away with anything. And that's the last 2 therapists I've had. They don't let me get away with anything. They're like, you do realize what you just said? Let me repeat it back to you. Oh, we've made progress, I guess, huh? Yes, you've made progress. Could we pause a moment and talk about you making progress? Oh, I guess so. The other thing I will say, group therapy can be a wonderful thing if you're ready for it. Because in group therapy, what I discovered was that my experience wasn't isolated. That we have all these commonalities, and these commonalities make us stronger as a whole. Somebody gets it, and that's an enormously powerful thing.
Thank you so much for sharing with us.
So yeah, this is actually really therapeutic for me, so thank you very much.
Thank you again, Michael. You have an enthusiasm and a passion that's very inspiring. That's all for today's episode. The next episode will deal with triggers, flashbacks, body memories, resurfacing memories, and shadow hallucinations. Have a good day and take care of yourself. If you're looking for resources on helping yourself or someone else who has gone through abuse, you can visit rain.org. Or, for resources specifically for men, go to oneinsix.org. If you're struggling with thoughts of suicide, please call one of the numbers in your area on the screen.